Hello and welcome to the CX Files for the 4th of July 2024. My name is Mark Hillary and I'm in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
And I'm Peter Ryan in Montreal. Mark, we have two very special events happening today. Independence Day in the United States, and we wish all of our friends in the United States of America a wonderful holiday today. And it's Election Day in the United Kingdom. So certainly a lot going on in the UK. Certainly, I think we'll all be watching the election results, streaming them online tonight, as you and I have had a history of doing and exchanging WhatsApp messages back and forth in terms of how the results are going. I believe the first time we did that was back in 2010, and anticipating some big shakeups tonight.
Yeah, I was actually live blogging it for Reuters that night. So that was certainly fun because I was able to publish stuff straight out onto the Reuters website as opinion from Mark on what's going on the UK elections. But this time I'm only just going to be watching it. But fortunately, because Brazil is behind the UK, I don't actually have to stay up quite through the night. Even when I get to midnight, it'll be 4 a.m. in the UK.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things I think that our listeners from outside the UK might want to keep in mind is it's not like, say, elections in Canada or in the US, where that night you've got a relatively good idea what's going to happen, how things are going to play out by maybe 9, 10, 11 p.m. In the UK, the counts go on literally all the way through the night, usually till 4 or 5 in the morning, which makes it all the more exciting. Although, as somebody who's worked in politics in the past, I think the adrenaline would be rushing through. I don't know if I'd be able to handle how the counts work there, but it certainly will be an exciting night. And as we anticipate potentially some big changes in terms of the UK and the direction that the country is going to go. But we're actually here to talk about a British guest that we have in the podcast today. And Mark, I was very, very pleased to be able to interview Sandra Busby. Now, Sandra is the CEO of Cnect Wales. This is the industry body for the Welsh Contact Centre Association. And they were recently celebrating their 20th anniversary as an organization. This was posted on LinkedIn, and I thought what an opportune time it would be to get Sandra onto the podcast and find out a little bit more about Wales and in terms of what's happening with Welsh CX. I will admit that I am very, very acutely aware of how things are playing out in England. Certainly, Scotland's a big part of the industry in the context of Great Britain and Northern Ireland itself. But Wales is perhaps for me one that I didn't have a lot of illumination on. And Sandra really provided, I think, some great insight and a good idea about the direction that things are going in that country. And I would just toss it over to you, Mark, just in terms of your own exposure and your own insight and in terms of Wales and the contact center industry. Was this an area that you were familiar with prior to Sandra's chat?
Yeah, I can remember even 15 or 20 years ago in India at the NASSCOM conference in Mumbai, seeing people up on the stage talking about the advantages of Wales compared to other regions of the UK. So they've certainly been banging the drum for Wales as a region for quite some time now. Certainly since around the millennium period, from my memory. I think that they've actually done a reasonable job of differentiating Wales compared to other parts of the UK. And there's certainly an interesting story to tell there.
Yeah, there is. And this is something that Alexandra has been really helpful in terms of explaining the evolution of the industry since Cnect Wales has been up and running. I think it was also really important that she explained the dynamics between the different delivery points, the established ones that we might be more familiar with, such as Cardiff, and perhaps some of the ones that are evolving into maybe ones that we're going to be more familiar with going forward. So absolutely a great chat. And it's good to understand about Wales, where Wales fits in to that whole UK or the whole British dynamic when it comes to CX delivery.
Well, given that the Ryan Reynolds TV program on Apple TV, Welcome to Wrexham, has taken off globally so much in the last couple of years, Wales is definitely getting quite a bit of international exposure. And, it seems to be that because of that TV show, there's actually an enormous amount of tourist interest in going to see Wales. So hopefully they can pick up more business and investment off the back of this interest as well.
I agree. I think that the whole Wrexham dynamic with the football club and what Ryan Reynolds and the guy from Only Sunny in Philadelphia, sorry, I forget his name. I should remember it. I love the
Rob.
TV show. But at the end of the day, Sandra and I allude to that in our chat, and I think that we should go right to the interview and find out a little bit more about Wales, about Cnect Wales, and to hear from Sandra Busby, the CEO. Well, the CX Files takes a turn to the United Kingdom today. Now, as many of you listeners will be aware, I'm a frequent visitor to the UK. I always enjoy my time there. But one of the parts of the UK, one of the parts of Great Britain and Northern Ireland that we have not explored a lot from a CX standpoint is Wales. And we're going to dive into it today. We're going to be having a bit of an immersion around the Welsh CX space. And I couldn't think of a better person than to help guide us through that absolutely gorgeous country than Sandra Busby, who is the CEO of Cnect Wales. Sandra, great to have you on the CX Files. Thanks for taking some time.
Peter, thanks for inviting me. I'm looking forward to having a chat with you.
Well, the feeling is mutual. And I will say, for our listeners' sake, that many of them, as they listen to the podcast or perhaps afterwards, will be going out to try and track you down on LinkedIn, as is just normal these days. And as it stands right now, you're kind of in LinkedIn limbo, LinkedIn purgatory. Can you tell us a little bit about what's happening and anybody who's looking to try and track you down, what they might be able to expect for the next day or two?
Well, yeah, I'm sorry, guys, but you won't find me on LinkedIn at the moment. Somebody, I got one of those notifications. Somebody's changed your password. You've been successful at changing your password by somebody in Singapore. And with the two-step verification, I didn't do anything. But the next thing I know, I'm locked out. But the worst thing is, and anybody that's in CX will know how frustrating, when we're in it and we don't get great service, it's been a nightmare. So you can find me through our business page on LinkedIn, which is Cnect Wales. But at the moment, unless LinkedIn come and help me out, I've just disappeared with thousands of connections.
Well, our fingers are crossed for you, Sandra, and I definitely know that a lot of people have been having a lot of issues when it comes to support around LinkedIn. And let's just hope that they're able to pick the ball up and to make sure that you're back online using that platform as soon as we possibly can see you, because it's become essential for anybody in business, certainly in our sector. But Sandra, I'd be interested to maybe start out with yourself and maybe hearing a little bit about you. Where are you based specifically in Wales? And if we could dive into the Welsh Contact Centre space, I was really fascinated about how Cnect Wales began, what exactly prompted it, because you've celebrated your 20th anniversary recently. Maybe give us a bit of a backgrounder on exactly what the organization is, how it got started, and what are its objectives?
Well, it's a really interesting one, and gosh, our objectives have changed so much over the years. We actually started in a way. Well, let me backtrack. I had a really great start of my career in media, on the commercial side of media, and then took redundancy. And somebody said to me, the public sector in Wales is looking for somebody to sell Wales and attract contact centres, call centres as they were, to Wales. Why didn't you take it? So I went for the interview and got the job. Now, we were called the Cardiff and Newport Call Centre Initiative, and I'm based in South Wales, in the capital, in Cardiff. And a couple of things happened. We were very, very successful over 3 years. And then one of the first things I did was set up an employer group, because you can't attract stuff to Wales unless you know what the issues are. What are the problems? What are the high points? What's the labour pool issues? Like all of that. And we did that. But then 3 years in, we saw the first departures to India from Wales. You know, back in 2001, 2002, we saw people migrating and offshore becoming really at its height. So the other thing that happened, and I love the public sector, they've been so supportive of us, that I realised it wasn't a great fit for me, because you don't know if you've got funding from one year to the next. So I put a proposition to Welsh Government at the time and said, look, you look after the inward investment. You need somebody to have an organisation to look after what we've got to stop them going to India. And then they agreed, gave me some money to start off. And what was born was the Welsh Contact Centre Forum. And that was, we lived with that name from 2004 until last year. We've attracted lots of business. We've got major brands running contact centres, CX operations, but we rebranded last year because of the changes again. Because you know, Peter, what's at the crux of any customer experience contact centre centralised service is doing right by your people and them doing right by your customer. So Cnect is about connecting networks and expertise for customers and people. And that's really what we're about, or customers and talent, if I need to use the T, but that is the people that they've got. They need to be able to get the right people, train the right people, look after the right people, nurture them, who will then look after their customers. So we rebranded last year after 20 years.
Rebrands are a lot of fun. I've been involved in a couple of them, and it's amazing. People think you're just switching the logo around. It's a lot more complex than that. And compliance can factor into it. Trademarking can factor into it. And congratulations, because I think that the rebrand's been very successful and it looks amazing. And I think that you're right. You know, you've made it much more contemporary. It's important for brands to evolve. And that takes me to my next question, Sandra. When we're talking about the evolution of Wales as a contact center destination, or shall we say, even perhaps a repository where contact center work can be done, you know, you alluded to the fact that over the course of the past 2 decades, we've seen a lot of migration of work going into places like India. I mean, obviously, South Africa is a very big play for the UK right now. We're seeing more interest in perhaps more exotic locales that weren't traditionally servicing the United Kingdom, like spots in the Caribbean. Even we're hearing Central and Eastern Europe. That's just one aspect of it. What would you say would be some of the key things that you think about when you're asked to describe the evolution or the changes of how the Welsh contact center industry has evolved over the course of the past 2 decades?
I think there's a couple of things here. I think obviously many years ago, call center, because we've gone from call centers to contact centers to really talking about centralized services now, because the customers can be internal, external, can be dealt with by email, bots, you know, all these different channels. So, I mean, besides the technological changes that we've seen, which are obvious, that call centers as they were then were firmly seen as cost centers. There was absolutely no investment in them at all. And it took a lot of CEOs, corporates and boards a long time to realize how important their people were and how important it was in terms of looking after a customer. You will know, I think what we're seeing now is 2 things that has how it's evolved. Number one, the consumer, you, me, everybody else that's out there that buys, we're a lot more savvy. So companies have to keep up to date with what we need. So we're more savvy. We want choice of channels. We want immediate service. So we're a lot quicker. We want to choose how we communicate with somebody. And let's not forget with channels, we're dealing with multi-generations here. So you've got to think about, it shouldn't ever really, I suppose, somebody said to me the other day, it shouldn't be digital first in a company. They should be focusing on digital choice, which I thought was absolutely spot on. So that's the first thing. But the second thing, I suppose, that has driven change from a consumer point of view is that what are the differentiators when you buy a product? If we buy a mobile phone, if we buy our utilities, even to a point, if we buy a flight, prices are very similar, products are very similar. So the only differentiator is CX, and it's the service I'm going to get off people. Now, you can't deliver that without the right people and the efficient processes and systems in place. And we've seen a lot of companies really focus in on that and realize that over the 20 years. And that's the biggest change for me, is understanding that the assets they've got in fantastic people. We don't see the big attrition that we used to see 15 years ago. You know, we're seeing companies offer careers. So that to me is heartening. And I think we're very good at that in Wales because of the network that we've run here. They're very good at sharing information with each other, and they don't want job hopping people that they all wanted that 15 years ago. But they're also good at sharing what technology works, because that's our biggest challenge at the moment, isn't it? Is what technology to deploy. So we've seen a lot of changes, and I think we've got a lot to come.
Okay, though, Sandra, I'm curious, as somebody who, as you and I were chatting before we hit the record button, as somebody who has, shall we say, a limited exposure to Wales, I'm guessing that probably most people listening to the podcast won't know a lot about the industry. And in fact, I'm sure that many people will be familiar with Wales, maybe to the extent of the TV program about the Wrexham football team that Ryan Reynolds and the guy from Sunny in Philadelphia have done. Sorry, I forget the other guy's name. He's a very good actor, but
Rob McElhenney.
Rob McElhenney, I should know that. He's Irish and I'm part Irish, and Ryan Reynolds is Canadian and I'm Canadian. So, you know, we're finding all these alignments here. Can you talk to us a little bit about the Welsh industry from an operations standpoint? Where would the bulk of contact center activity be happening in the country right now? And are there any up and coming locations that you, as executive director of Cnect Wales, have been maybe witnessing, or that you're seeing popping up that prospective contact center operators might want to be thinking about for a new deployment?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because, I thank our lucky stars for Wrexham Football Club and its Hollywood owners, because it does help put us on the map. And I'm a big football fan, but I do support Cardiff City, not Wrexham. But you know, it's a Welsh team, so I can support them as well. Wales has always been a fantastic location because of its historical, its history of people expect to have a job for a lot longer than other regions. So you look at London and it's always been quite transient in terms of, oh, I'll do this for a couple of years and I can move on to here. So Wales, because of the mining culture or the mining industry that we lost, and we had generations of people unemployed, it was a great location for contact centres because people wanted opportunities and they really relished doing the job. And over the years, I've worked with lots of regions across the UK. And when we've polled our members, you know, some of the big banks that are global, some of the global outsourcers, their service in Wales has always been the top of all their locations. So we know that people actually want to do these jobs. It's not a case that they're just in the job while they're earning money and then they're going to move on to something else. So that's always been great. The majority are in the south. So Cardiff and South Wales will have the biggest number of contact centres, biggest number of people, but we have them in 29 towns across Wales. And I bet you didn't even know there was 29 towns in Wales, because people think it's a small place. But yeah, we've got them pretty much spread. Not so much in the mid Wales is probably there may be one or two, but there's a smattering in north. And people put contact centres in the north because in Wales, well, in the UK, if you're offering banking, utilities and certain other things, the public sector, if you have Welsh customers, you have to offer a Welsh language service. So that made North Wales, where there's most North and West Wales are where the Welsh speakers are. So that made them attractive locations for that. And we did quite well out of the drive to take public sector business out of London and expensive property, expensive salaries. So Wales did quite well there. Although I never like to talk about Wales as a cheaper location for people, because we've always strived to make sure people get a good salary.
Yeah, no, and I think that that's important that you bring this up, because number one, you alluded to the fact that it's not the same as it was 15 years ago in terms of the job hopping. People are looking more career-wise at what they can do in CX, which is wonderful. And I think also from the positioning of a destination like Wales, it's not a cheap location, and nor should it be positioning itself as a cheap location. That's what I say to my friends in the outsourcing community, that they need to get away, regardless of where the delivery point might be. Don't focus on cheap prices. Focus on rapport between quality and price, focus on the value that's being driven, and focus on the capabilities, because that's really what the buyers are looking for. So I'm curious, Sandra, from the angle of Wales, and you've alluded to the fact that there are linguistic nuances in the country. I come from Canada, where it's bilingual, and I live in the province of Quebec, which is majority French speaking, and it's important for national organizations or even regional ones to have that element of both French and English. In the context of Wales, how challenging is it to find the requisite numbers of Welsh speakers that are able to provide these levels of service in a fluent, quality manner?
No, it's not. The demand isn't huge anyway. As a Welsh person, most Welsh people speak English, and some Welsh people are not comfortable doing business or talking about complex issues in Welsh, so would still prefer English. But Welsh is a protected language, and there is a drive to increase the number of speakers. But because the demand is quite low, it's quite easy to fulfill the numbers that you need. But I think growing in Wales, all the other languages that potentially we need. We've got a number of multilingual contact centres here, and we've got fantastic universities. And of course, Wales has always been a place for immigration and building lots of different communities, which we're very proud of, all the different communities and all the different languages that are spoken in Wales.
And as you should be. I mean, that's one of the things in my limited visits I've made to Wales. I found it to be an increasing multicultural and multilingual destination. And it's great that you're able to provide some of these more multilingual or linguistically diverse type campaigns for investors that might be looking to come in to service prospects around the UK or even across the EU. So Sandra, let's wrap this up here. It's been an absolutely fascinating discussion. Thank you so much for your time. Can you talk to me a little bit about your vision for Wales as a CX delivery point over the course of the next 20 years? When you're celebrating your 40th anniversary for Cnect Wales, where do you see the country being in the context of the industry that we're seeing changing so rapidly, not just at a UK level, but really at a global level?
Oh, that's a big question, Peter. And goodness knows whether I'll be here in another 20 years, but I hope.
I guarantee you will be. I've just got a feeling.
So I'm going to change that question just slightly. I'm not doing a political thing, but one of the big things for me now, and I think one of the big things that we're pushing in Wales with our members is, and I'm sure you'll have experienced this in Canada and around the rest of the world. How many times have we seen people make 100 frontline people redundant and then take on expensive data or analytic people over in the other corner of the business? The drive that we've got at the moment is that we start reskilling frontline people now for the jobs of the future and to identify those. So I would love to have a vision where, CX operations are offering all their people coding skills, because that then nobody knows how a bot should be speaking better than a frontline person. So when you're designing the new conversations for bots or whatever it might look like, it's these guys that we want to see developed into these new roles. So that's one of the visions. As I said to you, technology is coming to us thick and fast. So I don't know where it's going to lead us. I think my vision is that whatever companies do, they make the job for frontline people easier, but more valued, more complex, more interesting, and look after their customers. So any technology should be driven through what the people need to be able to do that and what we need as consumers to make our journeys easy.
I think those are some very sound elements of counsel, Sandra. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if anybody wants to learn more about Cnect Wales, where can they track down this information, putting LinkedIn aside?
Well, anybody can email me. We're all easy to find. Sandra@cnectwales.uk. As I say, our business LinkedIn page is still there, thank goodness, which is Cnect Wales. So please get in touch with us through there.
Well, thank you so much for your time. It has been an absolutely wonderful chat. Look forward to connecting with you again very soon. And we wish you all the best in your ability or your capacity to get back on LinkedIn as soon as possible.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, Peter. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. We really appreciate your feedback and suggestions. You can reach myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan via LinkedIn. Please also leave a rating or review on your favourite podcast provider, as that helps more people to find us. As always, we'd like to thank Chris Haig at Traction Media for the CX Files graphics. See you next week.